Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Cook County Board of Commissioners special meeting for public hearings today, Tuesday, January 30th. And just so the public is aware, we have our County Administrator, James Yorkie, on the line, and also Bruce Kimmel from Ellers, so they'll be joining us by phone. As I welcome you to our public hearing today, which has been noticed and scheduled for today, Tuesday, January 30th at 10 a.m., I'd like to remind you about what a public hearing is. It's a formal proceeding held in order to receive input from all interested parties, including the general public. It's a one-way conversation. Just so you know, we'll not be responding to comments, questions, or concerns expressed during the public hearing. Today's your opportunity to provide input on the intent to issue capital improvement bonds to fund the first few years of the county's capital improvement plan, or as we've referred to it, the CIP. It's with a proposed property tax abatement, and we're conducting this public hearing as the final method to gather your additional input. It's been publicized in a variety of ways. In addition to providing input, listening to others today can also provide important information on the issues and can provide clarity as well. For some time now, the county has been working on its capital improvement plan, the document that will guide future investments in county facilities. It's a tool that can help us reduce long-term costs associated with building operations and maintenance, and it creates predictability in budgeting and managing our buildings. Our Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee, a group of citizens representing each of the 5 commissioner districts, has been highly involved in this lengthy process. Today, we're being provided an update on proposed general obligation bonds and the county's financial management plan. And following that new business, we have our public hearings on the intent to issue those capital improvement bonds for our capital improvement plan and the proposed tax abatement. Following the public hearings, the county board will consider resolutions to approve issuing general obligation bonds for the CIP, a tax abatement, and the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds. Minnesota statutes 469.1813 to 1815 are where the authority is given for tax abatement, and it provides the county the ability to capture or use all or a portion of the property tax revenues for a defined period. With that, we will move into our new business and talk about the proposed general obligation bond, Series 2024A.
James or Brady, did either of you want to say anything to lead off, or shall I begin?
I don't really have anything to, Madam Chair, if I could, sorry.
Certainly.
I don't really have anything to add to what the Commissioner said. So, Bruce, if you want to kick us off, that'd be great.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Bruce Kimmel with Ellers. It's nice to be with you remotely here. I would like to start today's discussion by going over the pre-sale report that is in your agenda packet. I won't be going through this in a great amount of detail. There's a lot of information here. But the purpose of this document is really just to lay out all of the key points and elements of the proposed bond issue, and to make sure that, hopefully we're answering any questions you have about the structure of the bond issue and the other terms and conditions. This is really your opportunity to ask, any further questions or raise any concerns before authorizing us to move forward with the next steps of the bond issuance process. Of course, assuming that you approve both the CIP and the tax abatement elements. And that is one thing that I did want to note at the outset. This bond issue is a general obligation bond issue of the county, which means you're pledging your full faith and credit to the repayment of the bonds, and in promising to the bond investors that you'll pay the debt service on the bonds on time and in full. However, we are using 2 different statutory authorities within this bond issue. The bond CIP authority, as I like to call it, to sort of distinguish from your county budget CIP, and then the county tax abatement authority. And we're using those for 2 distinct purposes to fund projects within the county's CIP. So I'll get into a little more detail on that, but that's why we're having 2 hearings, one on the CIP, or the bond CIP rather, one on the tax abatement, That's why you have resolutions that are to approve both the bond CIP and the issuance of bonds against that CIP and the tax abatement, and then finally a resolution green-lighting the overall bond issue. So hopefully that sequence of events makes sense, and please let me know if you have any questions about that. So just kicking off in the pre-sale report, as you well know, we're looking to finance improvements to the county courthouse, community center, law enforcement center, and public works facility. And all of the debt service will be repaid with property taxes, although again, we're using those two different flavors, if you will, of statutory authorities. And those authorities are described in more detail in the next section. I won't go through all of the calculations that are involved, but just know that you have more than enough statutory capacity to use both the bond CIP and the tax abatement authority, and so neither of those is an issue whatsoever. The bonds will be issued for a total term of 16 years, really 15 years of amortization, and the first maturities will be in the years 2026 through 2040, albeit in February of those years. So really, the levy years involved, or the fiscal years involved, are 2025 through 2039. As with past bond issues that the county has issued, there will be a prepayment element, and that will occur 10 years from now in February of 2034 or any date thereafter. So you'll be able to either prepay or refinance the bonds after a 10-year period. Moving on to rating, some of you may recall that the county does have a AA rating with a stable outlook from S&P. That's an excellent rating, especially for a relatively small and remote county like Cook County, and we expect no problems whatsoever in seeing that rating reaffirmed by S&P. Your fund balances have been and remain extraordinarily strong. You're really doing all of the things that you can at the county level to warrant that high of a credit rating, and certainly your economy is doing well as well. So we don't see any problems with having that rating reaffirmed as part of this bond issuance process. This will be a competitive bond sale. So for those of you who are new to this, we will, on the sale date, be taking bids from underwriting firms potentially all across the country. And believe it or not, we do often get bids from underwriting firms that are based outside of the Midwest. And the winning bid, based on something called true interest cost, will be the firm to which you'll be awarding the bonds at that county board meeting following the bond sale. I won't go through a whole lot more of the details here, other than to point out that there is a slight risk factor in the issuance of the CIP portion of the bonds, in that after this public hearing, there is a 30-day waiting period before we can issue those bonds, because there is an opportunity for citizens to circulate a reverse referendum petition if they see fit to do that, to object to the use of the CIP bonds. We don't anticipate that happening, but there is that chance that a valid petition could be submitted. So we just wanted to flag that for you, that is really the only thing that could derail this bond issue as proposed, unless the county board decides not to move forward. And then finally, in terms of the narrative of the report, you can see the debt issuance schedule on page 5. We're here today on the 30th to have the public hearings and call for the sale of bonds. We're looking in a couple of weeks to talk with the rating agency. We'll distribute the official statement later next month. And then we're looking to actually have the bond sale lining up with your first board meeting in March, on March 12th, with closing before the end of the month. So you will receive the bond proceeds on or around March 28th. Then the next several pages show our estimated debt schedules for this bond issue. These are only estimates, and we have inflated the interest rates, so the debt numbers here should be higher than what you'll actually receive in the market on March 12th. But you can see on this first page how we've got a CIP element and an abatement element to fund the respective projects, and how the overall bond issue rolls up to a total par amount of just under $4.2 million. The next page shows the overall estimated debt service, and then you can see the CIP portion and the abatement portion respectively. One thing I should also note is the projects themselves that are looking to be funded. So under the abatement authority, we'll be using that for the community center improvements, and the CIP authority will be using for the county courthouse, law enforcement center, and public works facility improvements. Just so you can kind of keep that straight, we're only using the abatement authority for the community center improvements, and everything else will be using the CIP authority. Let me stop there and ask what questions you might have, if any, about the pre-sale report before I move on to the FMP.
Any questions that commissioners have for Bruce?
Well, I will, but I think I'll wait until the financial management plan, because might be answered there.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. You can go ahead, Bruce.
I'm sorry, I stepped in front of Commissioner
All right,
White.
Commissioner White.
Could we go over abatement? Who is, what that means?
Absolutely.
Please.
So abatement is a total misnomer. The county is not abating anything. What it is really is a redirection or a delineation of certain property taxes that you would already normally collect, that you are saying technically is going towards paying the debt service on the abatement portion of the bonds. And so we've identified two parcels in downtown Grand Marais, two hotel parcels that generate enough taxes between the two of them, county taxes that is, to fund the principal on the abatement bonds. And so we've proposed that they be the abatement parcels strictly for the purpose of meeting this statutory requirement. There is nothing about this abatement that will change the taxes that they pay relative to any other parcels in the county. And in fact, Brady Powers and his team won't have to do anything special as it relates to the taxes from those parcels. They can have a debt levy for the abatement portion of this bond issue, just like they would have a debt levy on the CIP portion of this bond issue. So for all intents and purposes, there really is no impact whatsoever from this abatement, either for property owners or for the county in how it budgets for and levies for debt service. We just need to use this authority for the community center improvements because we can't use the CIP authority for community center improvements under state law. That is not one of the authorized uses. So we kind of have to jump through this hoop, if you will, of setting up the abatement to be able to debt finance the community center project. And lots of counties and cities around Minnesota do the exact same thing. But, you know, in actual financial management going forward, there really won't be any impact from the abatement.
Thank you. I understand that.
And just for history, the county's done this twice in recent years. We did abatement bonds in 2014 and in 2018, and no taxpayer would be aware of it. Lots of properties were named and shown in documentation, but it has no effect on any of them. So.
Thanks for giving us that history. That's helpful. Other questions that commissioners have? All right. We aren't seeing any or hearing any questions, Bruce, so if you'd like to go on with the financial management projection.
Sure. So as part of this debt issuance process, Madam Chair and Commissioners, we did use up-to-date numbers from the county to update this financial management plan that you last saw last summer in 2023. We've included the county's current taxable market value and net tax capacity for 2024 and made projections of that going forward. We included the year-end fund balances or cash balances for each of the major groups that you see in the boxes that go down the page, using a trial balance report that Mr. Powers provided from 12/31 of 23. And we used the county's adopted budget for 2024, both overall revenues, including levies, and then budgeted expenses as well, and the use of fund balance. So we really have an up-to-date model of all of these major fund categories, and in what's, what is a reasonable guess as to how they will move forward. And so just to give a brief overview, you can see, and you'll remember this from last summer as well, we haven't really changed much of the methodology or the other underlying assumptions, but you can see that in the general fund, we do show that cash balance in the general fund growing over time, because we do show inflation in both the non-levy revenues, the general fund levy, and most importantly, if you look at that little line 13 notation, we fully expect that you'll be able to pay off your local option sales tax supported bonds basically at this time next year in 2025. You've been building up a strong fund balance in that lost account, and the first available opportunity to prepay the bonds will be in February of 2025. And if things keep going as they have been, more or less, and actually you could afford to see a slight decrease in this year's collections as compared to last year's, you will have enough money to prepay the remaining principal on those bonds in February of 2025, which would then free up that local option sales tax for other county purposes through a portion of 2030, excuse me. So that is really, we just sort of park that in the general fund. Of course, that can be used in other areas of the county budget. You could use that also to reduce tax levies if you saw fit, but we sort of, in a kind of value neutral way, just plug that into the general fund, and that is really the driving reason for the increase in cash balances that you see projected for the general fund. That's kind of a big one. Why don't I stop there and see if you have any questions about the general fund projection or the surplus local option sales taxes that we're projecting.
Questions that commissioners have? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yes, I'm totally confused about how we can use the local option sales tax revenues above our payoff amount for general fund. When you look at the state statutes for what those uses are could be used for, and when we issued that, there were projects that for years I've been told it can only be used for those projects. So what has changed to allow us to use this for general fund expenses?
Nothing has changed. The state statute you really need to look at is the specific Cook County authorization from back in, what was it, 2011 or 2012, I believe. And that specifically says that you need to use the sales tax to finance a list of projects, which you did, and those ranged everything from the YMCA to the broadband internet and a bunch of other things. But then the statute does say very clearly that once you have repaid those obligations that you incurred for that specific list of projects, the county can continue to collect and utilize the local option sales tax through essentially the first quarter of 2030. That is a fairly unique provision in your special legislation that you received, and I haven't seen that in other special legislation, at least in recent years. But it is undeniably clear that you have the legislative authority to continue to use that once your bonds are paid off, which again we believe you'll be able to do at this time next year, and that these dollars can be used for essentially any corporate purpose of the county, including capital projects, but potentially for other uses as well.
I guess I'm just surprised that this is the first time I've been here. I knew this. I would think this would have been discussed all through our planning process.
It has three or four times.
Yeah.
I guess what I was thinking, yes, use it for, we have YMCA things on here, that would fall under that category. We have other things. So when I heard we're gonna look at that, I thought it was because it's for the 5 listed projects.
All right. Commissioner Mills, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bruce, who can we thank for that 2012 special legislation?
I wish I knew. I believe I was actually at a meeting when I was up there, Commissioner Mills, that I talked about decertifying the sales tax as soon as we paid off the bonds, and you were the one who raised your hand and said, could you check the legislation? And then I got to talking with Brady and saw, oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. It's definitely unique and very special, and really creates an opportunity to take some pressure off of the taxpayers while also getting some important things done in the county going forward over the next 5-6 years. So I wish I could take credit for it, but it is really a shot in the arm, and will be a good thing once we pay off these bonds.
Yeah, I just got to believe there was somebody from Cook County working on that specifically, and so I'd really like to know who to thank. Because yeah, I was made aware of it, but I had nothing to do with it, and it's a huge boon for our community. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm sure there were state players as well, of course, but there's no doubt there was Cook County representation there. So
Yep.
There was actually 2008 was the special legislation, the first one, and then they revised it in 2009 from 14 million to 20 million of projects, but that termination language was the same. I think there was actually a hired lobbyist involved in this bonding, if I remember right. So we may have had help there, but I don't remember, I wasn't part of any discussion about how that would be written and that it would be written that way.
sure.
So,
Well,
surprise
research to
also.
do.
Well, and maybe we're getting a little off topic here, but Bruce, is this at all talked about around the state that you're aware of, either generally or our specific legislation?
no, I've never heard it raised anywhere but in your board chamber. And I work with a lot of counties, and so I think it's just a unique facet of your special legislation. And as you may know, a whole bunch of local option sales taxes were authorized to go to voters in cities and counties as part of this most recent legislative session, but they also put in place basically a 2-year moratorium on any new local option sales tax requests to allow a task force to do its work and for the legislature to figure out what it wanted to do about lots going forward. So things are going to be kind of quiet on the local option sales tax front here for at least until 2026 because of the actions that were taken last year at St. Paul.
Yeah, James, please, and I will as well try to make a connection with this task force and share our story, because I think it's a very powerful story for what opportunities there are for local municipalities to have these types of tools. And I know the state really likes to have more control over that, and clearly
Right.
there needs to be special legislation for any local option sales tax, but boy, what a boon for us. And to share that success story, I think would be really powerful. Hopefully we can do it again.
Right, I agree. So the last thing I'll just note there is that, we're showing the local option sales tax dollars there in the general fund, but of course they can be used as part of the highway fund, as part of the building and capital reserve fund down below, or, as you see fit in other areas of the county budget as well. I just wanted to keep all of those dollars in one place, sort of towards the top of the page. But of course, during your budgeting process, you'll be thinking about the best way to utilize that capacity. Okay.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Any other
Yep.
questions that commissioners might have? All right, well, we appreciate that explanation and responding to our questions, and with that, we'll move to
Sorry.
Commissioner Mills.
Sorry, sorry for that. I do have further questions, just interesting, and I guess I didn't run all of the columns with all of the rows, but just looking across at, say, line 22, ending general cash balance, it does grow, but then it does shrink at the end. And, another interesting, just a couple lines with the highway department, that is continually shrinking until the end, then it grows. And so I'm just curious about these strategies and how I can make more sense of that. And maybe that's not an easy question to answer, but it just caught my eye.
Yeah, that's a great question. And nothing is sort of carved into stone here. What we have tried to do is show levies going forward for these various funds that were sort of keeping things relatively steady as she goes, but knowing that we are showing fund expense growth as well, sometimes faster than revenue growth, and knowing that you're likely to have somewhat higher levies in certain funds in a given year and maybe lower levies in a certain fund in a given year. It all depends also on how much fund balance you see fit to have in a certain fund. Does the highway fund, for instance, technically need to have a large fund balance? No, it doesn't. Now, historically, you guys have kept a good-sized fund balance in the highway fund, and I could think of a good handful of reasons to do that. But in theory, you could run that at a small amount of balance, and know that you could just transfer funds in from the general fund as needed, and that's true of your other funds as well. So there's a lot of variables here, Commissioner Mills, and I would say we can certainly look at revising some of the assumptions if the board would like to see certain benchmarks met for various funds or at certain points in time. But what we're really trying to show here, or what this shows, because it could show something different, but what this shows is that even with the capital investment that is projected for the Justice Center, in whatever shape that might take, the county looks to be in very, very solid fiscal shape over the next 10 years, just as strong, if not stronger, than it is today, thanks in large part, again, to that local option sales tax revenue. And so, as your financial advisor, I can look here and say, yeah, we could tweak this, we could tweak that, we could tweak the other thing, certainly make some different assumptions about using cash versus debt for, capital projects. But at the end of the day, all of this in whole is telling me that you're in a very solid and stable situation, and you have some, good choices to make, not stressful choices as to where to cut or what to defer or what have you. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, and that's basically what I assumed, was just that we can both afford to spend down as well as legally or legitimately or policy-wise spend down as well and have that flexibility. So, yep, thank you.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning.
Just kind of a FYI for the future of next year and setting our levy. Is there anything that we should be aware of now to consider? We try to keep our levy below 10% the last few years without jeopardizing areas that we have to take care of. So any guidelines on that for levy for next year?
No, I think, Commissioner, you'll have some wiggle room to work with, and for the debt service that you'll be paying in the period ending up 2/1 of 25 on this new bond issue, we're only projecting about $130,000 of debt service there, so that's not going to be a big driver. That will jump up in fiscal year. Excuse me, I misspoke. That's $130,000 from 2024. That will need to jump up to about $370,000, let's say, for 2025. But even that, in the grand scheme of your levy and your budget, is relatively small. And again, you're going to start, next year receiving lost revenues that will really augment your levy. So I'm not really seeing a whole lot of stress on your levy for 2025. And I think, you also have very strong fund balances, and you can always at any point decide to use some additional fund balance and still be well above what the rating agencies and anyone else might expect of you to have in your rainy day funds. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of a stream of consciousness here, but I think you're in really good shape on not having a lot of stress coming into your budget, having those lost revenues, and having cash reserves that you could also tap as needed.
Thank you very much. We like to be proactive in all of our thinking, and not
absolutely.
like all of a sudden we're at a meeting and it's like, oh, we didn't know this or didn't prepare for this. So thank you.
Madam Chair, just mention, I wanted to know what those total county levy increases, these are just, estimates, it's a draft. I just want to know what was in here. So they run between the highest rate was 5.78 and the lowest 4.1. So for all of those years. So no high interest rates, or not interest, I'm sorry, levy increase rates. So between 4.1 and 5.78.
All right. Thank you, Brady.
May I
Commissioner
ask a
Hawkins.
question about that? So our 2024 levy used substantial fund balance to lower the levy. Has that been factored into the 2025 budget and ongoing expenses then?
It has, in the sense that we're starting with that amount. It's actually a little higher than what we run here.
Okay, this is
Yeah.
difficult for me to absorb in less than 24 hours. So I just want to make sure that this is been accounted for.
Yeah, so it's using the 2024 as a starting point, so it's all in there.
But we used, I just want to make sure our levy,
Yeah.
and then we factored in next year, though, we will have to pay for that $1 million somewhere. So it should be factored into these levies that are,
It is,
It is.
Commissioner.
thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Commissioner Mills?
Apologies, thank you, Madam Chair. One other questions, strategy that I had is just, again, regarding the local option sales tax dollars. The reason that this opportunity was brought to my attention is because of some efforts in the community to try to address our childcare needs. And because of the legislation, there is very unique and I don't know if extreme is the right word, but flexibility with these funds. And I know we have a lot of authority that's not, we have a lot of bonding authority outside of those funds. So I just want to make sure that we're leveraging the opportunities we have and not kind of having this boon and then just kind of taking it for granted. I don't know how to wrestle with that strategy, and maybe Brady, James, or Bruce, you can help, or maybe that's just too big of a question for this discussion right now.
No, I think it makes sense. I mean, what it says to me is we're okay going ahead the way we are, but anything you could get from the state bonding might free up some of that money for other things.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Or any other source of revenue that comes up during this.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm not expressing myself clearly. Yeah, I guess it's just a Peter or Paul situation, so, never mind. We'll move on.
I mean, Commissioner Mills, I think I understand what you're driving at, and it's both ends, right? It's you've got these current year dollars that will be coming in 25 through 30 that can be used to pay costs that year, or to build up fund balance and to pay costs in a future year, somewhere after 2030, or to pay debt service on new bonds that you might sell for, whether it's a child care facility or something else, or to defray the needed tax levy in a given year and reduce it from what would otherwise be required as an offset, right? And so that's what we're really all about, is looking at all of those options and working with our clients to come up with striking the right balance, and not just saying, well, we're going to use those 2.6 up to $3.2 million a year just all at once, or to drop the levy, but to really think about how those dollars can be leveraged for a variety of county priorities. And it's a good problem to have. It's complicated, and there's a lot of ways you can go, and you'll probably strike a balance between a number of competing pressures and priorities, but it's all stuff that can be projected and analyzed, right? And that is something that we would look forward to helping you and Brady and James with, is looking at options and looking to strike the right balance, and also not leading the county over a cliff, because what we don't want to do is set up lots and lots of obligations that once the sales tax runs out, if you will, then all of a sudden you have to jump your levy by a ton. That would not be palatable to you as elected officials or to your citizens. And so, making sure that we feather this new money in, and the priorities that you're taking on, are they short-term priorities? Are they long-term, ongoing priorities? And figuring out a sustainable, a fiscally sustainable game plan. That is really what we would look to do.
Yeah, that was very, very well said. Thank you. And I don't know that it directly addresses what I was thinking about, but it certainly holistically does, and I appreciate that. Maybe just so that what my thoughts were a little clearer, I was just thinking, what if we don't use the local optional sales tax revenues for this, right? Then it would only be levy supported, and that would be a much greater impact on the levy. And the reason I was asking that question was, what if we use these funds for other things that we may not always be able to use monies for? But the fact of the matter is it comes down to the board's priorities, and we always could levy for the whatever childcare needs that we want to try to address. So I really appreciate your explanation though about that balance and feathering it out, kind of doing the off-ramp, because that has been one of my concerns just with our discussions about our compensation study and just our significant capital improvement needs. So thank you for your work on that.
Other questions that commissioners have? Commissioner Hawkins?
So I, like Commissioner Mills, thought if there was an opportunity, childcare was discussed about local option sales tax. Housing also has been discussed. And my understanding was, well, we'd have to wait and get this renewed. Now I'm finding out, no, we don't have to get it renewed. So I agree, we have other needs in our community also that people are asking us to address. And I'm wondering if we were to use some of that money for some of that, what does this spreadsheet look like with half the amount of local option sales tax? What does that do to our budget? Or like I said, I haven't had time to analyze this. What's the best option for this county board to make on this financial management plan? I can't give you an answer today because I haven't had enough time to dig into it.
Commissioner, I wouldn't expect you to. Those are much bigger topics and will require a lot of financial and policy discussions. But I think what my impression was that there were commissioners that wanted to make sure that before embarking on this bond issue in 2024, that the county wasn't looking at some sort of a fiscal cliff or some sort of snag that was really going to be exacerbated by the issuance of these bonds. And what I can tell you is that the complete opposite is true. Not only do you have more than enough capacity to entertain these capital projects that are financed with the 2024 bonds, but that you have the capacity to entertain and execute on Justice Center options and also other priorities of the county, while balancing other interests on your operating budget and controlling the overall levy. And I know there's a lot of things besides capital projects that need to go into the mix, but this is showing that really there is no stress that would prevent me from saying yes. As your advisor, I agree that you've got the wherewithal to move forward with the county's CIP.
Thank you, Bruce. Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Bruce. And yes, I think Commissioner Hawkins and I are thinking similarly. I guess I want a little bit further, and I'm thinking like, okay, like you said, if we didn't include the sales tax, then this would all just be levy. And so then there'd be huge levy increases, right? And then we could address other things like housing or childcare. Well, right now, and granted, housing can be a long-term process, but right now, after discussions with the HRA and the proposed budget for this upcoming year, more funding right now is not what the priority is. They're trying to just kind of get some stuff done, and then they'll be coming forward with other, hopefully bigger requests or just more progress, more projects. Versus using this local option sales tax, keeping our levy at a projected smooth level, and then also trying to address our other options, because we know we have all those things to try to tackle. But I just really appreciate, so any way you cut it, we have this money and we're going to have to use levy, and it's just like how to keep that the smoothest, how to address our community needs and keep the levy the smoothest we can.
Right. Commissioner Mills, if I can just interject really quick. I could take all of that local option sales tax out of this projection and still show you a smooth, viable levy trend going forward with all the other assumptions the same as it relates to the county's CIP. That might tap most of the capacity that you've got unless you wanted to entertain more significant levy increases. But I want to make sure that everyone there understands that you don't need this local option sales tax in order to chart a viable course. It might look a little bit different from what I'm showing here, some different assumptions in terms of project timing and whatnot, but or maybe a little bit lower fund balances, but still, within the range that you want to keep. So there would likely be some finessing to do, but it's not that this sales tax is what's keeping the county afloat. It's quite the opposite.
And thank you. This is Commissioner Mills again. Thank you, Bruce. I was already feeling pretty comfortable, and now I'm feeling even more comfortable. So hopefully I won't fall asleep here. I think would be really helpful to see that for us as a board. But I also know that this is not written in stone. We could address it again in 60 days if we wanted to, and have a different financial management plan. So we can always adjust this, and yes, we should be looking at it annually anyways. And so in the future, if we do in fact want to use that local option sales tax for something else, we can then pull that out and recalculate and see how that would impact the levy. But for what I'm seeing, I think right now this is the most stable plan that I've seen for a long time.
Other questions or comments? It seems that certainly, we have plenty of capacity with this information, and we have in the future opportunities to look at our priorities. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner White.
Does the county ever share this 1% sales tax with the city? I'm thinking about the water treatment, the impending need expenses, because the county benefits from taxes from tourism, and we make use of the sanitation facilities that the city provides. Is there some sort of do we have a shared commitment to that at all, or it's all on the cities for managing and supporting that critical infrastructure? I'm not suggesting anything.
That's all in the city.
believe,
PUC
yeah.
customers pay for that. Yep. There are no shared, maybe the library, actually, I was going to say there's no shared capital projects with the city, but the library is certainly one. And I'm trying to rack my brain for others quickly, but.
Brady, would you be aware of any in the past?
I'm not aware of anything like you're suggesting.
So they have complete, just like the hospital has taxing authority, the city has their own taxing authority, has their own capital improvement plan, has their own priorities, independent governing body. But I agree, certainly critical infrastructure for our whole community, and something that I would like to talk more about, partnering with them, but it's just not in any of our plans to this point.
Other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments?
So, Madam Chair, so basically this is just an update from, was it June when we approved this last, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. So yeah, I like the regular updates and the regular adjustments and discussions, so we can have a better understanding of where we are now and where we want to go long-term and what our options are. Thank you again.
All right, well, with no further comments or questions, we'll move into our public hearings. The first public hearing is on our capital improvement plan and on the intent to issue capital improvement bonds. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak this morning? Any members of the public? So as you come forward, make sure that you sign in on the sheet by the microphone, and after signing in, state your name, address, and feel free to share your remarks with us. And based on the number of people we have here today, we won't shorten it to 3 minutes. I think 5 minutes is absolutely fine.
Jarvis Thompson, District 4. After listening, I hope my questions are going to make some sense. One of the first things I was wondering is, what is the significance of the year 2032 in that fiscal management plan? At the very, the columns go from 2024 to 2032. What's the significance of 2032? Or is it just where you ran out of paper? Because I hear you throwing numbers around like into 2039 or some point in the future. So I'm curious as to what happens after 2032, given the way that that fiscal management plan is structured. What kind of things would dramatically change if your projections are wrong? I mean, you've given some pretty concrete percentages here all along that, let's see, fund balances, how they're going to, let's see, the percentages that you have in each of those categories. Some of them show 0% of change. Estimated 0%. Some show 4, some show 3, and it's the same percentage all the way along. Is there nothing that's ever going to change in the whole world that's going to change those percentages? Are you always going to have a 3% on that particular line, or a 4% on that particular line, or 5%? It's like, you know, do we think the world's just going to stay exactly like it is today? Is there any, you use a 5% tax base growth at the very top there as you're looking at taxable properties. Why 5%? And is that something that's never going to change? Again, it's like, what happens when the world changes? And are we not going to expect that something's going to change? Okay. In looking at the amount that you are talking about raising the bonds for the $3.5 million, I was trying to figure out how it was going to get used, and I looked at your capital improvement building by building, and as you talk about in the paper, these are the things we're going to focus on, like the courthouse listed improvements and highway department, et cetera. So in that 5-year budget, 2023 to 2028, the list shows that you're going to use $1,007,000 something for the courthouse improvements that you've listed. It says you're going to use $151,000 something for law enforcement, but that doesn't include the Sally Port or the evidence room or any of that kind of thing. You're going to use $60,000 for the highway cold storage and $150,000 for the highway main building. When you take all those dollar amounts away from the $3.5 million that you're going to bond for, it leaves you $1.4 million unidentified. What is that used for? Where does that go? Is that hiring an architect, or what does that $1.4 million get used for? You know what? I think I'm going to stop my questions right there, because some of them got answered in your earlier discussions, and some of them I have to rethink. So I will come back to you again.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Are there other members of the public that wish to speak on the capital improvement plan and the intent to issue capital improvement bonds? Any other members of the public? If not, we'll close that public hearing and open the public hearing for the proposed property tax abatement. Are there members of the public that wish to speak about the tax abatement? Any members of the public here to speak on tax abatement? Hearing or seeing none, we'll close that hearing. And we will move on to our resolutions. So we're on item 4. And the first resolution we're looking at this morning is a resolution to approve a capital improvement plan and intent to issue general obligation capital improvement bonds. Any questions or discussion? Commissioner Hawkins, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I recognize I am the commissioner on this board with the least experience in public service. You all have much more experience than I have, so I'm going to ask you for your forbearance in my questioning. So I did a timeline of this whole process and how we got to this point here. And I'm a little confused, so I would just like some clarification. At our last Committee of the Whole meeting, we discussed the strategies, and we still were discussing how this might look. Very confusing. It's a complicated process, difficult to understand. At our December 19th meeting, that was a Committee of the Whole meeting, right? December 19th? No, it was a regular meeting.
Regular meeting.
That was, Bruce was there, and James and Brady were working on the bond issuance, and at that time, we were told there would be a first bond for CIP for deferred maintenance, second portion to be for architectural services for a justice center. Like, okay. And we leave it up to them to work it out, what's the best strategy, how to make this work. So I've got that in the back of my head, that there's going to be 2 bondings for different things. And then I read the public notice in the paper, which there is no mention of architectural services for a justice center. Now we've talked about it in public meetings. It doesn't specifically spell it out in our CIP plan, but there's option A, B, and C. And back in October, I think it was August, when we approved the CIP plan, we were counting on state bonding to help with the Justice Center proposal. If we got state bonding, that was the best option going forward. So that's in the back of my mind. But it didn't say what it was going to cost for design services. Then the public reads this notice, no mention of, we're going to build a justice center. We're moving ahead, that's the plan. I think this room would be packed if they thought that was what we were doing today, because we have said that's an option. The community, I believe, supports the deferred maintenance. There's no question in my mind that the community says, you need to fix the buildings you have and take care of them. There is still question, I believe, in the public's mind, whether or not the Justice Center is the best option forward. And we kind of led them to believe, well, if we get state bonding money, okay, the financials will make sense. If we don't, we will take a step back and reevaluate. Is that still the best option? In fact, that was discussed at our last Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee meeting just last week. That was my impression of what the committee was told then. here I am today, and it kind of looks like we're setting aside $1.5 million for design plans. And I am not comfortable with that today. So there's my discussion.
Auditor Powers.
Madam Chair, may I?
Surely, go ahead, Administrator Yorkie.
Thank you. So a couple of points in response to Commissioner Hawkins' statement. At no point have we tried to hide the fact that the bond issuance was to cover the architectural services for the Judicial Center. We have been talking about this publicly for months. And the other point that came up in our committee of the whole presentation from Attorney Hickens was the idea that when the board takes a vote, that sets a direction for the organization, and it's my duty as administrator to act on whatever the board approves. And the board did approve the capital improvement plan. And part of that is the development of plans for the capital or for the Judicial Center. I don't have a choice. I mean, it's not really my decision to say, well, I'm going to implement this part of the board's decision, but I'm going to ignore this other part. The board voted, the board discussed the capital improvement plan. It voted on the capital improvement plan. And based on that vote, I've acted to begin the implementation of the plan. What I'm hearing here is an effort to relitigate a settled board decision. And I mean, commissioners can bring up concerns whenever they want to. But my job is to carry out the directives of the board. And that's what we're doing here. If the board wants to entertain or make another decision about the CIP, that's up to the five of you to decide. But I can't selectively determine what parts of a plan I'm going to implement. Once that plan is approved by the board, it's my responsibility to carry it out.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister Yorkie, and thank you, Commissioner Hawkins, for bringing this up. I think it's important to talk about, I still think we're all on similar pages, although it sounds like there might be some confusion with communication. I, too, still believe that the board's intention is to relook at everything depending on how the state bonding package plays out. In the meanwhile, we need to make our best efforts at moving forward to ensure the best outcome with those state bonding. And so this is what does that. If it comes back and be like, nope, you guys are not getting $8 million, it's like, okay, well, we better take a step back and look at things again. I don't think this is, my biggest hesitancy is the commitment for the architectural services. That's the hardest part for me. But I do recognize that that is necessary for us to have any chance with that state bonding. So it's certainly not simple, that's for sure. But it is still my intention 100% to take another look. We have to if we don't get that bonding money, just to be able to see where everything lines out. Unless I'm misunderstanding the situation, that's how I see it. And yes, Administrator Yorkie's right. We have directed him to go that way. But what's not said in his actions is our intentions to be flexible if we don't get what we're aiming for.
Correct. Commissioner Hawkins.
So, thank you for that. The financial management plan, as I read this, like I said, I just got it last night, shows no state bonding, which makes me think, okay, This vote today is saying we're going ahead with a justice center because we can afford it whether we get state bonding or not. That's where my concern comes in, because I didn't know that until 5:30 last night. And I don't think the community understood that impact. And I feel that we haven't given them enough time to respond. Do you support 48% of this bonding money going to an architectural firm for a justice center that we may not even want? We had other options that we said we would consider. But if we spend $1.5 million on a plan for a justice center, are we really going to go back and look at options B, C, and D? I don't think so. So this vote today says in my opinion, that we're telling the administrator, go ahead, this is what the county board wants. And I am having serious reservations that we are being asked to absorb this and the implications of this in a very short time frame.
Madam Chair, could I just make a clarifying comment?
Surely. Go ahead, Bruce.
The 5-year CIP, the bond CIP as I like to call it, to differentiate from your own county budget CIP, this CIP very deliberately only includes the near-term deferred maintenance and also the planning and design services that are part of the county CIP that Administrator Yorkie was referring to. You could not proceed with the actual judicial center project under this CIP because we did not advertise the full amount of the project in the public hearing notices. The full amount of the project is not in the bond CIP, and it's not in the resolution that's before you. So there's absolutely, it's just not even feasible for the county to move forward with the judicial center under the actions that are before you today. And there will need to be another full public hearing process to adopt a new bond CIP to fund a judicial center project if and when the county board decides to move forward with that actual project. So I want to make clear that we did include the CIP costs in the FMP, but that's just a projection. That's not saying the county is going to do this. And in fact, legally, you could not proceed under the actions that are before you today.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Commissioner Storley.
When the legislators look at bonding requests, one of the things they have a criteria with this particular situation of Justice Center would be an architectural money that would go toward that. You've got to complete the bonding request with all of the criteria, otherwise they're not going to look at us. So everything is included and needs to be included in order for us to be considered in the legislative session this year.
That's correct, from my understanding. Commissioner White.
So when this was advertised, Bruce, would this be the abatement bonds? I mean, abatement dollar bonds that would be going towards hiring an architect?
No, the abatement bonds are for the community center portion.
Okay, so so the CIP bonds doesn't identify publicly that it is for hiring architectural services and getting plans. That's not spelled out in the notice.
So can it be used for that? I'm still confused.
I guess, Attorney Hicken, I would ask you, given that we have a public notice that's gone out, in my understanding, that was the understanding we all had here, but does the public notice meet the legal requirements?
The public notice went through Brady's office, and I didn't review it, so I haven't, I think it was,
It went through Bob Tofty
yes,
from the Freiberger firm, sent out that actual notice.
yes. So our bonding attorney would have prepared that and could answer that question. I'm not involved in the bonding
Okay.
stuff. Was the capital improvement project referenced, though? And the capital
Yes.
improvement project
Yes, it was.
includes the architectural?
Would you like to read it?
I
It's
can
in
read
the-
it, but
It's in
I
the board
guess,
packet too, right?
I guess I'm not gonna comment on, I'm assuming it's legally sufficient, and that was what we were going for.
Commissioner
Could we
White.
have Commissioner Hawkins read this to just remind everybody who's read the public notice as to what was going to be voted on, what these funds were identified to be used for? Which is the point of a public notice, is to let people know, not assumptions, but to actually know everything. Would you mind reading, Nishi?
Go ahead.
Madam
if
Chair,
you'd like.
you want? So notice of public hearing on a capital improvement plan and the intent to issue capital improvement bonds by Cook County, Minnesota under Minnesota Statute Section 373.4. Notice is hereby given that the Board of County Commissioners of Cook County, Minnesota will conduct public hearings on Tuesday, January 30th, 2024 at 10 a.m. in the Cook County Boardroom, Cook County Courthouse, and it gives the address, to provide an opportunity for the public to express their views concerning, 1, the county's capital improvement plan for the years 2024 through 2028, and 2, the county's intent to issue general obligation capital improvement bonds in an amount not to exceed $3,575,000, the bonds, pursuant to the capital improvement plan approved by the Board of County Commissioners. The proceeds of the bonds shall be used by the county to construct the following improvements and to pay costs of issuance and capitalized interest, if any, on the bonds. 1, county courthouse improvements, including replacement of heating and air handling systems and lighting fixtures. 2, law enforcement center improvements, including replacement of lighting fixtures, security, and detection systems. And 3, public works facilities improvements, including replacement of highway office building electrical system and plumbing, and replacement of highway cold storage building electrical system and windows. The bonds and the interest thereon shall constitute general obligations of the county, secured by the full faith and credit of the county. All persons interested may appear and be heard at the time and place set forth above. So, my expectation was this 3.5 was for the deferred maintenance, 23 and 24. And discussions of other costs, I mean, it was mentioned using cash balances for other things, and I just assumed that between James, Brady, and Bruce, okay. What I have in my information today, it doesn't sit right yet, especially since I got it so late last night. And I'm still like, wait a minute, that's not what I thought I was going to see. So,
Commissioner
I had
White.
a number of phone calls and inquiries as to what were these bonds being issued for, and specifically, are you hiring a project manager and/or an architect? I'd heard different things, what we were going to be doing these bonds for, but and it's me, I know it's me, but I don't recollect that we were, at one point, I cannot give the date, that Administrator Yorkie said that we would be using bonding money to help pay for a project manager to oversee the deferred maintenance of all of the buildings. I cannot tell you when that was. I made the assumption that public notices of hearings need to be specific as to what is being the dollars will be going for, paying for. And it does not read, it does not spell out architectural services. And that seems like a grave omission, if this is the legal notice to the public. Perhaps calling Freiberger Buchanan and talking to their bond attorney or a bond attorney there and getting clarification from Bob, can't think, Tofty, that it's fine to ask for money, but don't explain exactly what it's all going for. Just, you don't have to identify everything.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Hawkins.
I have a question for our county attorney, please. Thinking about this process and, can we postpone or continue a public hearing? So today, we've opened it, and we could continue it.
It's already been closed, though.
It's already been
Oh,
closed.
okay, so we have to, all right, I just,
Yep.
thinking out loud here. What are our options?
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Mills.
I understand what Commissioner Hawkins and Commissioner White is saying is that they would have liked to, in the public notice, see spelled out architectural services in the capital improvement plan. And I would not have had a problem with that whatsoever. We talked about this at the previous meeting about what these costs would be. And I was under the assumption that as we move forward, those are some of the first costs that we would incur. And so as we go through our capital improvement plan, that is included in that. But there are certainly many aspects of it that are not spelled out. I just was under a different assumption, I guess, just that it was understood what's there. So I hear the concern. I don't know how to remedy it.
Correct.
And I find that if this is a legal binding document, assumptions have no place in legal binding documents. It needs to be in black and white and signed by the parties. Assumptions is not a way you do good business.
And I'm just, Commissioner White, looking at the statutes on public hearings and notices, and I'm not finding anything that requires that level of detail. Administrator Yorkie, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add, when we first talked about the possibility of pursuing state bonding, I recall multiple conversations we had about the need to commit some resources up front to do some of the planning to make our application competitive for funding from the state. And I shared with the board that part of that was going to be, we'd have to get an architect on board and get as far down the road as we could to having some plans. And so the focus really has been on trying to get that process going. We actually are planning to interview a couple of architectural firms next week to get the ball rolling on that. And as Bruce said, this is a first step. And the focus of our work right now is trying to be as competitive as we can for state bonding, because any funds that we get from the state takes pressure off the levy to cover the costs of the CIP implementation. And so I understood that there was agreement that we wanted to pursue the state bonding, and that this step that we're taking in terms of trying to get plans drawn is toward the goal of getting the state bonding. There is no guarantee that we will get the state bonding, but there's a pretty strong likelihood that if we don't try to develop plans, the strength of our application will be significantly decreased. And so, I mean, I'm trying to balance all of these considerations. I am trying to follow the directive of the board. And I understand the angst that people feel about this. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. There are no guarantees about getting state assistance. And so that makes it really maybe uncomfortable to determine how to move forward. But I've been pretty clear about the fact that we do need to start developing plans in order to have something to show our legislators to say, yes, we're committed to this. We want state assistance to make this project go, and we've already made the commitment of local resources. If we're not willing to commit local resources to develop plans, then again, the likelihood that we're going to get state funding or state bonding is going to be pretty low. And so that's the conundrum that we face right now. I appreciate the comments from the commissioners in terms of their discomfort with this. And I wish there were more certainty about the outcome of our bonding application, but that's something that we can't know right now.
Commissioner Storley, you have a question.
Thank you for the comments, James, because I understand too the importance of our role in this. We've got to have our ducks in a row for that. But the question right now is, how was that put in the paper? And I don't know, Bruce, do you have anything you can say to us as far as putting in the paper? I know Brady did his job, and we're assuming that the Tofty Group in Duluth did their job. So what is the question? Why are we now deciding that the ad in the paper is not right? Can you fill us in, Bruce?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to. So, as I understand it, Freiberger, Bob Tofty, and his paralegal looked at the list of CIP bonds, CIP costs, and drafted this language accordingly. And so they saw fit to word it the way they did.
We have a fire alarm.
Excuse us, we have a fire alarm. We're going to have to stop right now.
Okay, bye.
to the public what just happened.
Absolutely.
For folks, just
All right, we are back on with our special meeting for the public hearing, and we just want to inform the public, we had an alarm go off, and so we had to end our meeting rather abruptly. We apologize for the inconvenience for the listening or watching public, but we are here to continue now. It's about 11:35. So our discussion was about the statute and if our notice of public hearing was appropriate according to that statute. So I guess we want to continue back with that discussion. In what I've looked, it seems that it fits. Have other, well, I guess I'd ask.
Madam Chair, could I pick up with my comments?
Certainly. Thank you, Bruce.
All right, thank you. And I apologize. I'm going to have to go in just a few minutes. My wife is actually just coming out of some surgery. Everything's just fine, but I'm going to need to go see her, and I apologize. I didn't expect this call to go as long. But I did have some observations that I would like to share with the board. So I was speaking about the public hearing notice, and your bond counsel did see fit to word it the way they did. But I can also see the point that a couple of the commissioners are making about not explicitly listing the A&E services for the Judicial Center project. And I also understand that it would be essential to move forward with those A&E services if you're going to have any chance for state bonding dollars. So as I see it, you really have a couple of ways to proceed here. The first way would be to just restart everything on the CIP public hearing notice and the bond issue. So renotice a public hearing with a notice that explicitly lists the architecture and engineering services, hold a new public hearing, and then bond for the full amount that's contemplated here. Another option that would not require restarting the process would be to remove the A&E service costs from the CIP and from the bond issue, so bond for a lower amount that is just for the deferred maintenance type projects that are listed in the county's CIP for 2023 through 2025, and then use cash to fund whatever A&E services are necessary. And then one thing that you could do if you saw fit to do this second approach would be you could always opt to reimburse yourself from a future bond issue for that use of county cash. And there would be no limits on your ability to do that, as those are considered pre-development costs, and federal regulations give you sort of free rein to do that kind of reimbursement without restriction. And certainly you've got the cash available that you could afford to use that either permanently or just on an interim basis to fund those A&E services. So as I see it, if the board decides that it's not comfortable with what was relayed in the public hearing notice as drafted by Freiberger, you've got, again, those two options: either restart the process or take that architecture and engineering out of the game plan for the bonds and use cash for that instead, per the county CIP that was approved however many months ago.
Thank you for that information, Bruce. I appreciate that. Any comments or questions that commissioners have on that? Commissioner White?
As to Administrator Yorkie, that he listed some of the buildings. Well, why bother listing anything? But be that as it may, for transparency's sake, it's really vital, even if it's not illegal. Assumptions, as I said, is no way to be transparent or legal to be completely understood. So I am not comfortable voting on architectural services using the CIP bonding. I would favor doing what Bruce had suggested.
So in other words, bond for the cost for deferred maintenance and then take cash on an interim basis for the architectural services.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm seeing some nods.
I agree with that option. I would be more comfortable doing that option
All right.
than.
Thoughts by other commissioners? Commissioner Mills?
Bruce, why wouldn't we do that in the first place?
Well, I think there was an interest in maintaining cash balances and the flexibility that comes with that. But it's a great question, and I, this bonding strategy just came from a number of discussions that my colleague and I had with James and Brady, about the county CIP overall and all of the things that needed to get done and what made sense to bond for versus use cash for. But it's absolutely a policy decision, and you could have opted for this use of cash even if we hadn't had this discussion about the public hearing notice.
And so, Brady and James, how does that sit with you? It makes me pretty uncomfortable to pay $1 million out of our cash reserves. And if we're legal as far as our public notice is concerned, I mean, in Exhibit A, the notice for the public hearings, it does say, pursuant to the capital improvement plan approved by the Board of Commissioners, and so, the design and everything is in that capital improvement plan. I mean, there's a lot that was not spelled out, and as long as we've communicated what we need to, I would feel much more comfortable pursuing what the professionals have laid out for us. But James and Brady, if you are more comfortable spending that design costs out of our fund balance, I'm open.
I don't have any qualms about that. We've got the LATC funding, part of the ARPA. Still, we have a lot of money there. One option was to use some of that for levy purposes again, but that's there. We've been earning excess revenues on our interest. We continue to do that. Those rates haven't really dropped yet, so we may have a few more months of that. Between those and our generally strong fund balance, I don't have a problem either way.
Administrator Yorkie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be amenable to using cash on hand to pay for those architectural and engineering services if that is the board's position. I want to be really respectful of the firms that we've solicited to provide proposals for this work. As I mentioned, we do have interviews scheduled next week with 2 architectural firms, and that is a result of a discussion that we had with our Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee at the end of, or let's see, I guess it's just been like a week or so ago. And they wanted to invite those firms to interview so that we could talk about their approach to developing plans for us and talk about some of the some of the many questions that I think the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee members have about the process and some of the unknowns in terms of structural engineering questions and so on. So if it is the board's position that it would be more comfortable covering those costs with cash on hand, I think that's a good way to go. If there's still a lot of hesitation about the whole idea of developing plans and making a full court press to pursue the state bonding, that's a discussion I think we need to have sooner rather than later, because I'm still hearing hesitation. And again, I respect folks' reasons for feeling that hesitation. I think we'd all like to have complete certainty about how things are going to proceed. Obviously, we don't have that. And so, I want to make sure that we're not sending signals to potential firms that would be in a position to help us. If we're too ambivalent about our course of action, I think that's going to send a negative signal to some of these firms that would be interested in working for the county. I don't want that to happen, and so I think we need to have some level of agreement about our path forward. And so if it is the board's decision today to take the A&E costs out of the bonding and simply use our own resources to cover those costs in the short term, I'm good with that. But I just want to make sure that we're committed to that course of action.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner White.
It's about transparency and if it's really legal, and what directions were given to Bob Tofty for the bonding specifically. He would have written it with the specifics in mind as to what it would be covering. Would you know, Attorney Hicken?
I've not been in communication with Bob Tofty, so that's been between Ellers
Okay.
and.
But the other thing to say that the firm's coming to help us, they're coming for money. I mean, let's be honest, they don't think, oh, that little community up there in the tip of the arrowhead, let's go help them. These are people that are in business to do their job, which would be assisting us in what we need to go forward. So if they see a project as something they would like to pursue, they will be pursuing it and assuming that we will pay them for it. Another assumption, but when you sign the contract, then we will be paying them.
Commissioner Mills.
I think what Administrator Yorkie is referring to is just kind of the cultural implications of wavering with a professional organization. And yes, they will be working for money, but we all know it's a labor market right now, and if we are difficult to work with, then they can find easier money elsewhere. We need to get what we need and what we want. We don't need to compromise on that level from a contractor standpoint. But I want to be as straightforward as possible and forthcoming. And I hear what Administrator Yorkie is saying, and to Commissioner White's point too. Yes, they're here providing a service that we'll be paying for, so it's a both and. I don't know. I don't know what to think. I've spent a lot of time trying to protect our cash balance for upcoming capital improvement projects, and here we are. And our hired financial advisor put forward this plan, and I think it's a good one. It will create more work to recalculate the plan if we're taking out a cash balance. I don't know how much of a difference or how much work that really means, but it's just refiguring, and we need to be looking at this more frequently, so it'll have to be refigured more frequently as well, but I'm just kind of going in circles about all that.
Madam Chair, could I interject again?
Go right ahead, Bruce.
All right, and this is in part a response to the comments that Commissioner Mills just made. It really won't be a great deal additional work for us at Ellers. We would restructure and resize the bond program to really just focus on the deferred maintenance projects that were already contemplated. We would update the CIP for that lower amount, as well as the pre-sale report for that lower amount. And we would work with Freiberger to update both the CIP resolution and the bond resolution accordingly. So, so as I would see it, you could adopt the abatement resolution today. I would recommend that we postpone the CIP resolution and the bond resolution until your next meeting, and we could just provide updated information on that. That would not change the bond timing, in part because the clock, the 30-day clock that I referred to earlier, is from the date of the public hearing, which you've already done, and so that would just go as smoothly and according to plan as we've thought. And again, because we're looking at a significantly lower number, the CIP process, including all of the notices and the document itself, are just fine. You've met the statutory requirement as far as the public hearing goes. So I really see this as a good option for the board, given the opinions expressed, and we could just then give you updated documents, the CIP, the pre-sale report, and the resolutions for your next meeting, and keep everything else on track. And you could also defer the abatement resolution until the next meeting, or you could take it up today.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Administrator Yorkie.
Thank you. Bruce, just a question about the process. So would we need to renotice a hearing to take place on February 13th? Okay.
No additional hearings are required. And the 30-day clock on what will be the revised CIP can start today. So it's not a problem. Yeah, but we wouldn't need a new CIP hearing because we are doing a lower amount and essentially a smaller list of projects.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mills.
And Bruce, I understand if you need to go and you can leave it whenever you need to. So we do not need to do a public hearing. However, the concerns raised were about transparency. And so I just don't know if not having a hearing, a future hearing, would alleviate those concerns. Or if
But
just by
Commissioner,
yes.
yeah, but Commissioner Mills, it sounds like the concern was that we didn't expressly state the architecture and engineering services for the Judicial Center. Everything else was in there, right? So it sounds like by removing that from the CIP and from the expectation for the bonding, we're more closely fitting what was noticed in the paper.
Yes.
So I, as your advisor, I wouldn't see any reason to do another CIP because we've effectively done the CIP hearing. I'm sorry, another public hearing because we've already done the public hearing on that list of projects that was listed expressly in the paper.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So given that, it sounds like as a board that we would want to entertain the resolution relating to tax abatement today and take care of that, and then move our other matters to the next board meeting with adjustments and new figures. So is there a motion to approve by resolution the tax abatement, granting that abatement for properties for 15 years to help construct improvements at the community center here in Grand Marais?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Thank you, Commissioner White. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So I believe we'll bring up our other matters as related to items A and C with revisions at our next board meeting, which would be the second Tuesday of February. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support for adjournment. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We are adjourned.